As night fell over Xylos, James stared out at the alien landscape. The jungle glowed with bioluminescent life, and 3 moons hung in the sky like precious gems. He had a choice to make: follow Carrie into the unknown, or lose himself in the intoxicating embrace of the Cerulean Sisterhood. With a deep breath, James made his decision. He slipped out of his quarters, moving silently through the crystal corridors. As he reached the edge of the city, he cast one last glance back at the shimmering spires. Then, steeling himself, he plunged into the glowing jungle, towards whatever secrets awaited him in the heart of Xylos. They crept through the silent corridors, the crystal walls amplifying every footstep. "Where are we going?" James whispered, his hand resting on the weapon concealed at his hip. "To a place where Azura's influence doesn't reach," Carrie replied, her voice echoing in the narrow passage. "A place where the truth is hidden." They reached a heavy, crystalline door. Carrie touched a sequence of symbols etched into its surface, and the door slid open, revealing a dimly lit chamber. Inside, rows of stasis pods lined the walls, each containing a human form suspended in a translucent liquid. James's blood ran cold. "The missing expedition," he breathed, his voice filled with horror. Carrie nodded grimly. "They're alive, but their minds, they're gone. The nectar has consumed them, turned them into little more than living batteries." James approached one of the pods, his face inches from the glass. The man inside was gaunt and pale, his eyes vacant. A network of tubes snaked across his body, drawing a glowing purple fluid. "How could they do this?" James asked, his voice shaking with anger. "How could they turn people into this?" "The nectar needs a constant supply of energy," Carrie explained. "It feeds on life force. The Sisterhood uses these people to power the city, to maintain their control over Xylos." She led him to a console at the far end of the chamber. Flickering holographic displays showed data streams and complex equations. "I've been studying their research," Carrie said. "The nectar isn't just a plant extract, it's a sentient organism. It can manipulate the minds of those who consume it, turning them into loyal servants." James stared at the displays, his mind reeling. This was far worse than he had imagined. "But why?" he asked. "Why are they doing this?" Carrie hesitated, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Azura believes she's saving Xylos. She claims the nectar is the only way to maintain the planet's delicate ecosystem, to protect it from outside threats." "But it's a lie," James said, his voice hardening. "It's a way to control the planet and its people." Carrie nodded. "I've seen evidence that the Sisterhood is suppressing technology, manipulating the weather, and controlling the Xylosian natives. They're not caretakers, they're conquerors." "The natives?" James asked. "Are there others on this planet besides the Sisterhood?" "Yes," Carrie said. "They live in hiding, scattered across the jungles and mountains. They resist the Sisterhood's control, but they're weak and disorganized." James's mind raced. He had to find a way to help them, to expose Azura's lies and free Xylos from her grasp. "What can we do?" he asked Carrie. "We have to disrupt the nectar production," she said. "If we can find a way to weaken its influence, we can break the Sisterhood's hold on the planet." "How?" "I have a plan," Carrie said. "But it's risky. We'll need help." At that moment, a voice echoed through the chamber. "Looking for something?" James and Carrie spun around. Azura stood at the entrance, her silver eyes blazing with anger. 2 guards flanked her, their hands resting on energy weapons. "I wondered where you disappeared to, Carrie," Azura said, her voice dripping with venom. "Betrayal doesn't suit you." "I'm not betraying anyone," Carrie retorted, her voice defiant. "I'm trying to save Xylos." Azura laughed, the sound cold and mocking. "Save it? You're a fool, Carrie. You don't understand the true nature of this world. The nectar is the only thing that keeps it alive. She turned her gaze to James, her expression softening slightly. And you, James? I thought you were different. I thought you could see the beauty and the power of Xylos. I see the truth, James said, his hand tightening on his weapon. I see what you're doing to this planet and its people. Azura sighed. Such a waste. I could have shown you wonders beyond your wildest dreams. But you've chosen your side. She nodded to the guards. Take them. The guards lunged forward, energy weapons raised. James and Carrie reacted instantly, drawing their own weapons and firing. The chamber erupted in chaos as energy blasts ricocheted off the crystal walls. James fought with a desperate intensity, his training kicking in. He took down one of the guards with a well-aimed shot, but the other was closing in. He dodged a blast, feeling the heat sear his skin. Suddenly, Carrie screamed. James turned to see Azura standing over her, a crystalline blade pressed against her throat. Enough! Azura shouted, her voice filled with fury. Drop your weapon, James, or I'll kill her. James hesitated, his mind racing. He couldn't let Carrie die. But if he surrendered, they would both be at Azura's mercy. He lowered his weapon slowly, his eyes locked on Azura's. Let her go, he said, his voice tight with anger. Azura smiled, a cruel, triumphant smile. Of course. But first. She plunged the blade into Carrie's chest. Carrie gasped, her eyes widening in shock. She slumped to the ground, blood pooling around her. James roared in fury, lunging towards Azura. But it was too late. Azura and her remaining guard disappeared through a hidden passage, the door slamming shut behind them. James rushed to Carrie's side, cradling her in his arms. Carrie, no. Stay with me. Carrie's eyes fluttered open, her gaze unfocused. James. She whispered, her voice weak. Find them, stop them. Her eyes closed, and her body went limp. James held her close, his heart breaking. He had failed her. He had failed Xylos. But as he looked down at her lifeless face, a new determination surged through him. He would avenge Carrie's death. He would expose Azura's lies. He would free Xylos, no matter the cost. He gently laid Carrie's body on the ground, rose to his feet, and turned towards the hidden passage. His eyes burned with righteous fury. I'm coming for you, Azura, he growled. And I won't stop until you're brought to justice. James followed the hidden passage, his senses on high alert. The tunnel twisted and turned, leading him deeper into the crystal city. He passed through abandoned chambers and forgotten corridors, the silence broken only by the echo of his footsteps. He emerged into a vast cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow. A network of pipes and machinery crisscrossed the space, humming with power. At the center of the cavern stood a massive crystalline structure, pulsing with a vibrant purple light. The heart of the nectar production, James muttered. He approached the structure cautiously, examining the intricate network of tubes and valves. He recognized some of the technology from Carrie's research. Suddenly, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Kale, one of the former members of the missing expedition. But he was different now. His eyes glowed with a strange light, and his movements were stiff and unnatural. You shouldn't be here, Kale said, his voice monotone. Azura doesn't want anyone to see this. Kale? James asked, his voice filled with surprise. It's me, James Hawthorne. Don't you remember? Kale stared at him blankly. I am a servant of Xylos. I serve the nectar. James realized with a jolt that Kale was completely under the nectar's control. His mind had been erased, replaced by a single, overriding directive, to protect the nectar. I'm not your enemy, Kale, James said, trying to reason with him. Azura is lying to you. She's using you. Kale lunged forward, his hands outstretched. You threaten the nectar. You must be eliminated. James dodged the attack, drawing his weapon. He didn't want to hurt Kale, but he had no choice. He fired a stun blast, hoping to incapacitate him without causing permanent damage. The blast hit Kale square in the chest, but he barely flinched. He continued his assault, his eyes burning with unwavering determination. James realized that the nectar had made Kale resistant to energy weapons. He would have to find another way to stop him. He led Kale on a chase through the cavern, dodging pipes and machinery. He was looking for a way to disable the nectar production, to weaken the system and break Kale's control. He spotted a control panel near the crystalline structure. If he could overload the system, he might be able to disrupt the nectar flow. He sprinted towards the panel, Kale hot on his heels. He reached the panel and began frantically pressing buttons, trying to override the safety protocols. Kale tackled him to the ground, knocking the wind out of him. He pinned James down, his hands closing around his throat. James struggled to breathe, his vision blurring. He managed to kick Kale off him, scrambling back to his feet. He looked around desperately for a weapon, for anything to defend himself. He spotted a loose pipe wrench lying on the ground. He grabbed it and swung it at Kale's head. The wrench connected with a sickening thud. Kale staggered back, his eyes losing their unnatural glow. He crumpled to the ground, unconscious. James stood over him, panting. He had done it. He had stopped Kale, at least for now. He turned back to the control panel and resumed his efforts to overload the system. He finally managed to bypass the safety protocols and initiate a system shutdown. The crystalline structure began to tremble, its purple light flickering. Alarms blared throughout the cavern. The nectar flow slowed to a trickle. James knew he had to get out of there before the system went into complete meltdown. He turned and fled, retracing his steps through the tunnel. He emerged back into the Crystal City, the alarms still echoing in the distance. He needed to find the Xylosian natives, to warn them about Azura's plans and rally them to fight back. He made his way to the edge of the city, towards the jungle. He didn't know where to find the natives, but he had to try. As he entered the jungle, he heard a voice calling his name. He turned to see a small group of Xylosian natives emerging from the shadows. They were led by a wizened elder, his face etched with lines of wisdom and resilience. "You are the outsider," the elder said, his voice raspy but strong. "We have heard of your actions. You have disrupted the nectar production." "I'm here to help you," James said. "I know what Azura is doing. I want to help you free Xylos." The elder studied him carefully, his eyes piercing. "Why should we trust you? You are one of them." "I'm not like them," James said. "I've seen what Azura is doing. I've seen the missing expedition. I want to stop her." The elder nodded slowly. "We have been watching you. We know you are different. But the sisterhood is powerful. We are weak. We can fight them together," James said. "We can expose their lies and rally the people of Xylos." The elder hesitated for a moment, then nodded decisively. "Very well. We will help you. But you must understand the true nature of the nectar. It is more than just a drug. It is a living entity. And it is connected to Azura in ways you cannot imagine." James listened intently as the elder explained the history of the nectar, its origins, and its connection to Xylos. He learned that the nectar was a sentient organism that fed on the life force of the planet, draining its energy to sustain itself. Azura was merely a vessel, a conduit for the nectar's will. James realized that he was facing an enemy far more powerful than he had imagined. But he was not deterred. He was determined to fight for Xylos, to free it from the nectar's grasp, no matter the cost. The Xylosian natives led James to their hidden village, a cluster of camouflaged huts nestled deep within the jungle. He met their warriors, their healers, and their leaders. He learned about their customs, their beliefs, and their struggles. He discovered that the natives had been fighting the sisterhood for generations, resisting their control and protecting their ancient traditions. But they were outnumbered and outgunned, their resistance slowly being crushed. James shared his knowledge of the sisterhood's technology, their weaknesses, and their plans. He helped the natives develop new strategies, new weapons, and new tactics. He trained them in combat, teaching them how to fight against energy weapons and how to disrupt the Nectar's influence. Together, they planned an uprising. They would launch a coordinated attack on the Crystal City, disrupting the Nectar production and freeing the enslaved humans. They would expose Azura's lies and rally the people of Xylos to their cause. As the day of the uprising approached, James felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. He knew that the odds were stacked against them. The sisterhood was powerful, and Azura was ruthless. But he also knew that they had a chance to free Xylos and create a better future. On the eve of the uprising, James received a message from Earth. A rescue fleet had arrived in orbit, sent to find him and the missing expedition. They were ready to evacuate him and launch an assault on the Crystal City. James faced a difficult decision. Should he return to Earth, to safety and civilization? Or should he stay on Xylos, to fight for the freedom of its people? He thought of Carrie, of her sacrifice, and of her unwavering belief in the cause. He thought of the Xylosian natives, of their courage, and of their determination. He knew what he had to do. He sent a message to the rescue fleet, asking them to hold back their assault. He explained that he was working with the natives to launch an uprising. He asked them to provide support, but to let him lead the fight. The commander of the rescue fleet, Valerius, was skeptical. He didn't trust the natives, and he didn't want to risk James's life. But he respected James's judgment, and he agreed to hold back the assault, for now. As dawn broke over Xylos, the uprising began. The Xylosian warriors, armed with a combination of primitive weapons and advanced technology, launched a coordinated attack on the Crystal City. James led the charge, fighting alongside the natives. They battled their way through the streets, taking down guards, disabling security systems, and freeing enslaved humans. The fighting was fierce and bloody. The Sisterhood's forces were well-trained and well-equipped. But the natives fought with a ferocity born of desperation, driven by a desire for freedom. As they neared the center of the city, they encountered Azura's elite guard, a squad of heavily armed warriors clad in crystalline armor. The guard blocked their path, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts. James and the natives took cover, returning fire. The battle raged back and forth, neither side gaining the upper hand. Suddenly, Kale appeared, his eyes glowing with the familiar unnatural light. He charged towards James, his hands outstretched. James knew that he couldn't fight Kale. The Nectar had made him too strong, too resilient. He had to find a way to reach him, to break the Nectar's control. He dodged Kale's attack and grabbed him by the shoulders. He looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of recognition. "Kale, it's me, James," he shouted. "Don't you remember? We were friends." Kale stared at him blankly, his expression unchanging. "I serve the Nectar," he said, his voice monotone. "No, you don't." James shouted. "You're better than this. You're a human being." He grabbed Kale's head in his hands and squeezed, focusing all his energy on breaking the Nectar's grip. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Kale's eyes flickered. A glimmer of recognition appeared in their depths. "James," he whispered, his voice filled with confusion. "What's happening?" "I'm freeing you, Kale," James said. "I'm breaking the Nectar's control." Kale screamed in agony as the Nectar's influence faded. He collapsed to the ground, writhing in pain. Azura appeared, her eyes blazing with fury. "Kale," she shrieked. "What have you done?" She raised her hand, preparing to strike down Kale. But James stepped in front of him, shielding him with his body. "Stop, Azura," he shouted. "It's over. Your reign of terror is at an end. Azura hesitated, her face contorted with rage. You can't stop me, James, she said. The nectar is too powerful. Xylos belongs to me. No, it doesn't. James retorted. It belongs to the people of Xylos. And they're ready to fight for it. He gestured to the Xylosian warriors, who stood behind him, their faces filled with determination. Azura looked around at the scene of destruction, at the chaos and the bloodshed. She saw the faces of the natives, their eyes burning with defiance. She realized that she had lost. The people of Xylos had risen up against her, and they would not be denied. With a final scream of rage, Azura turned and fled, disappearing into the depths of the Crystal City. The uprising was a success. The Xylosian natives, with James's help, had overthrown the Cerulean Sisterhood and freed their planet from the Nectar's control. The remaining members of the Sisterhood surrendered, their power broken. The enslaved humans were freed, their minds slowly recovering from the Nectar's influence. But the victory came at a heavy price. Many lives were lost in the fighting, both natives and humans. The Crystal City was in ruins, its crystalline structures shattered and broken. The jungle was scarred by energy blasts and explosions. James helped the natives rebuild their society, establishing a democratic government and implementing sustainable practices. They worked to heal the planet, restoring its ecosystems and repairing the damage caused by the nectar. Kale, his mind freed from the nectar's control, became a valuable member of the new society. He used his knowledge of the Sisterhood's technology to help the natives develop new tools and improve their lives. As for Azura, she disappeared without a trace. Some say she fled into the depths of the jungle, seeking to reclaim her power. Others say she was consumed by the nectar, becoming one with the planet. James never saw her again, but he knew that her influence would linger on Xylos for years to come. The scars of her reign would take time to heal. The rescue fleet offered James a chance to return to Earth, to a life of comfort and security. But he declined. He had come to care for the people of Xylos, to respect their culture, and to believe in their cause. He could not abandon them now. He decided to stay on Xylos, to help the natives build a better future. He knew that it would not be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and disappointments. But he was committed to the cause. Years passed. James became a respected leader in the new society, a bridge between the humans and the natives. He helped them develop a new culture, a blend of their traditions and his knowledge. He found love with a Xylosian woman, a healer named Lyra, who had fought alongside him in the uprising. They married and had children, raising them to respect both their human and Xylosian heritage. One day, as James stood overlooking the rebuilt Crystal City, Lyra approached him, their children playing at her feet. "Are you happy, James?" she asked, her eyes filled with love. James smiled, taking her hand in his. "Yes, Lyra," he said. "I am happy. I have found a home here, a purpose." But as he looked out at the blooming jungle, he couldn't shake a sense of sadness. He knew that Xylos would never be the same. The scars of the nectar would always be visible, a reminder of the price of freedom. And he knew that he could never truly escape his past, his memories of Earth, his regrets, and his losses. He was forever changed by his experiences on Xylos. But he was also grateful. He had found a new life, a new love, and a new purpose. He had helped to create a better future for the people of Xylos. And that, he knew, was worth all the pain and all the sacrifice. The story ends with James standing with his family, watching the sunset over Xylos. The planet is slowly healing, its purple foliage blooming once more. But the scars remain, a reminder of the bitter bloom of freedom. Decades after the uprising, Xylos flourished. The alliance between the humans and the natives had created a unique society, blending the best of both cultures. Technology and tradition walked hand in hand, and the scars of the nectar were slowly fading. The Crystal City, once a symbol of oppression, now represented hope and renewal. James, now an elder statesman, often found himself reflecting on the journey. His hair was silvered, his face etched with the stories of a life lived fully. He'd seen Xylos at its darkest, and he'd helped guide it toward the light. He still missed Earth, but Xylos was his home now, his heart forever intertwined with its fate. One day, a young Xylosian woman named Anya approached James. Anya was bright, inquisitive, and deeply committed to preserving the planet's fragile ecosystem. She was a scientist, a dreamer, and a symbol of Xylos's future. "James," she said, her voice filled with urgency, "I've discovered something troubling." James listened as Anya explained her findings. She had detected trace amounts of the nectar's residual energy deep beneath the planet's surface. It was dormant, but it was still there, a potential threat to Xylos's long-term health. "It's as if the nectar is lying in wait," Anya explained, biding its time to re-emerge. James felt a chill run down his spine. He had hoped that the nectar was gone forever, but it seemed that its influence still lingered, a hidden danger lurking beneath the surface. "What can we do?" he asked Anya. "I'm not sure," she replied. "I need to study it further. But I fear that if we don't act, the nectar could reawaken and threaten Xylos once more." James knew that they had to take Anya's warning seriously. They couldn't afford to be complacent. The future of Xylos depended on their vigilance. He called a meeting of the council, the governing body of Xylos, comprised of both humans and natives. He shared Anya's findings and urged them to take action. Some council members were skeptical, dismissing Anya's findings as alarmist. They argued that the nectar was gone, and there was no reason to fear its return. But James stood firm, reminding them of the horrors of the past and the importance of protecting Xylos from future threats. He convinced the council to support Anya's research and to allocate resources to develop a plan to contain the nectar's residual energy. Anya and her team of scientists worked tirelessly, studying the nectar's properties and searching for a way to neutralize its effects. They explored ancient Xylosian texts, consulted with native elders, and experimented with new technologies. After months of research, Anya made a breakthrough. She discovered that a rare mineral found deep within the Xylosian mountains could neutralize the nectar's energy, effectively rendering it harmless. But extracting the mineral was a dangerous task. The mountains were riddled with unstable terrain and guarded by fierce creatures. It would require a skilled and courageous team to venture into the mountains and retrieve the mineral. James knew that he had to lead the expedition himself. He was old, but he was still strong, and he had the experience and the knowledge to guide the team through the treacherous mountains. He assembled a team of experienced explorers, including Kale, who had become a skilled engineer, and several Xylosian warriors. Together, they set out on their perilous journey, determined to secure the mineral and protect Xylos from the nectar's return. The journey was fraught with danger. They faced treacherous terrain, battled fierce creatures, and endured harsh weather conditions. But they persevered, driven by their commitment to the cause. After weeks of hardship, they finally reached the mineral deposit, a vast cavern filled with shimmering crystals. As they began extracting the mineral, they discovered that the cavern was guarded by a massive, mutated creature, a remnant of the nectar's influence. The creature attacked, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts. The team fought bravely, but they were outmatched. Several members were injured, and Kale was critically wounded. James knew that they couldn't defeat the creature. They had to find a way to escape. He ordered the team to retreat, while he stayed behind to hold off the creature. "Go," he shouted. "Get the mineral back to the city. Save Xylos." The team hesitated, reluctant to leave James behind. But they knew that he was right. Their mission was more important than their lives. They retreated, carrying the mineral with them. James faced the creature alone, his weapon raised, his heart filled with resolve. He fought with all his strength, dodging energy blasts and landing well-aimed shots. But the creature was too powerful. It knocked James to the ground, pinning him beneath its massive bulk. As the creature prepared to deliver the final blow, James closed his eyes, accepting his fate. But then, a familiar voice echoed through the cavern. "Get away from him." Anya appeared, wielding a newly developed energy weapon. She unleashed a powerful blast, stunning the creature and freeing James. Together, James and Anya fought the creature, finally managing to drive it away. They were battered and bruised, but they were alive. They returned to the city, where the mineral was used to neutralize the nectar's residual energy, ensuring Xylos's long-term safety. James, hailed as a hero, continued to serve the people of Xylos, guiding them toward a brighter future. He knew that the planet would always face challenges, but he was confident that the alliance between the humans and the natives would endure, ensuring the survival and prosperity of Xylos for generations to come. Many years later, James, now a legend, sat beneath the shade of a crystal tree, watching a new generation of Xylosians playing in the city square. His body was frail, but his mind remained sharp, his spirit undimmed. Anya, now the leader of Xylos, approached him, her face etched with a mix of joy and concern. "James," she said, "we've received a message from Earth." James's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't heard from Earth in decades. He wondered what news they brought. Anya explained that a new exploration vessel had arrived in the Xylos system, sent to re-establish contact and assess the planet's progress. Some members of the council were wary, fearing that Earth's arrival could disrupt Xylos's hard-earned peace and independence. But James saw an opportunity. He believed that Xylos could learn from Earth, and Earth could learn from Xylos. He convinced the council to welcome the explorers, with caution and respect. The Earth vessel landed near the Crystal City, and the explorers emerged, their faces filled with wonder and curiosity. Among them was a young woman named Elara, historian and cultural anthropologist, who had studied Xylos for years. She approached James, her eyes shining with admiration. "James Hawthorne," she said, "it's an honor to meet you. Your story is legendary on Earth." James smiled, extending his hand. "Welcome to Xylos, Elara," he said. "I hope you find what you're looking for." Elara spent months studying Xylosian culture, learning about their history, their traditions, and their values. She was impressed by the harmony between humans and natives, by their commitment to sustainability, and by their resilience in the face of adversity. She also discovered the truth about the nectar, about Azura's reign of terror, and about James's role in liberating Xylos. She realized that Xylos had overcome a great darkness, emerging stronger and wiser. Elara shared her findings with Earth, telling them about the wonders of Xylos and the lessons they could learn. She urged Earth to approach Xylos with respect, to learn from their experiences, and to work together to create a better future for both planets. Her message resonated with the people of Earth, who had grown weary of war and environmental destruction. They saw in Xylos a beacon of hope, a model for a more sustainable and harmonious future. Earth and Xylos established a formal alliance, exchanging knowledge, resources, and cultural. James Hawthorne gripped the controls of his single-pilot craft, his knuckles white as he navigated the turbulent atmosphere of Xylos. The planet's swirling purple clouds obscured his view, and warning alarms blared throughout the cockpit. "Come on, baby," he muttered, wrestling with the stick. "Just a little further." A violent jolt rocked the ship. James's head slammed against the headrest, and he tasted blood. The craft spiraled out of control, plummeting towards the surface below. "Mayday, mayday," he shouted into the comm, "this is Agent James Hawthorne. My ship is going down on Xylos, coordinates." The transmission cut off as the ship smashed into the planet's surface. Everything went black. When James regained consciousness, his first sensation was pain. His head throbbed, and every breath sent daggers through his ribs. He blinked, trying to focus his blurry vision. Lush purple foliage surrounded him. The twisted wreckage of his ship lay scattered across a small clearing. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the dense canopy, James froze. He wasn't alone. A group of women stood at the edge of the clearing, watching him with curious eyes. But these were unlike any women he'd ever seen. Their skin was a deep, shimmering blue, and they moved with an otherworldly grace. One of them stepped forward. She was tall and statuesque, with piercing silver eyes and long hair the color of starlight. When she spoke, her voice was melodic yet authoritative. "Welcome to Xylos, traveler. I am Azura, leader of the Cerulean Sisterhood." James struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain in his ribs. "I'm James," he managed, his voice hoarse. "James Hawthorne. My ship, there was an accident." Azura's lips curved in a knowing smile. "There are no accidents on Xylos, James. The planet brought you to us for a reason." She extended a hand, and James hesitated only a moment before taking it. Her skin was cool and smooth against his. "Come," Azura said. "We will tend to your wounds and show you the wonders of our world." As they led him through the dense jungle, James's mind raced. This wasn't how his mission was supposed to go. He was here to investigate the disappearance of the previous expedition, not to fraternize with the locals. But maybe this was his chance to gather intel. The jungle opened into a clearing, revealing a breathtaking vista. A city of crystalline spires rose before them, shimmering in the purple light. Walkways of twisted vines connected the structures, and James could see more of the blue-skinned women moving gracefully between them. "Welcome to our home," Azura said, her voice filled with pride. James's eyes widened. "It's incredible," he breathed, momentarily forgetting his mission in the face of such alien beauty. Azura led him to one of the crystal spires. Inside, the walls seemed to pulse with an inner light. James was guided to a soft bed of what looked like living moss. "Rest now," Azura said. "When you've recovered, we'll show you the true wonders of Xylos." James wanted to protest, to ask questions, but exhaustion overtook him. He sank into the moss, and darkness claimed him once more. He awoke to the sound of soft singing. A young woman sat beside his bed, her blue skin a shade lighter than Azura's. She held a small vial filled with a glowing purple liquid. "You're awake," she said, her voice lilting and musical. "I'm Lyra. Azura asked me to tend to you." James sat up, surprised to find the pain in his ribs had subsided. "What is that?" he asked, nodding towards the vial. Lyra's eyes sparkled. "This is the essence of Xylos itself. We call it nectar. It has remarkable properties." She uncorked the vial, and a sweet, intoxicating aroma filled the air. James felt his head swim. "I don't think." He began, but Lyra pressed a finger to his lips. "Trust me," she whispered, her face inches from his. "Just a taste." Before James could protest further, she tipped the vial to his lips. The liquid was cool and sweet, unlike anything he'd ever tasted. As it slid down his throat, warmth bloomed in his chest, spreading throughout his body. Colors seemed to intensify. The crystal walls pulsed with vibrant energy. James could hear the beating of Lyra's heart, smell the exotic flowers blooming outside. What is this?" he gasped. Lyra's laugh was like tinkling bells. "It's life, James. Pure, distilled life. And there's so much more to experience." James's training screamed at him to pull back, to focus on his mission, but the nectar sang in his veins, awakening desires he'd never known existed. Lyra took his hand, pulling him to his feet. "Come. Azura is waiting." She led him through winding crystal corridors. James marveled at how steady he felt, how alive. The nectar seemed to have healed his injuries completely. They emerged onto a wide platform overlooking the jungle. Azura stood at its edge, her silver hair billowing in the breeze. She turned as they approached, her eyes glowing with an inner light. "James," she purred. I trust you're feeling better. He nodded, struggling to find words. The nectar heightened every sensation, making it hard to focus. Good, Azura said. She gestured to the vista before them. What do you see? James looked out over the alien landscape. The purple foliage stretched as far as the eye could see, broken only by glittering crystal spires. In the distance, a range of mountains shimmered like mirages. I see beauty, he said. Unlike anything on Earth. Azura's smile widened. And power, she added. Xylos is alive, James. The nectar is its lifeblood, and we are its caretakers. She turned to face him fully, her silver eyes boring into his. Why are you really here, James? The question cut through the haze of the nectar. James tensed, his hand instinctively moving towards the concealed weapon at his hip. Azura laughed, the sound both beautiful and dangerous. Oh, don't worry. We have no quarrel with your people. In fact, we welcome the last group that came here with open arms. James's eyes narrowed. The missing expedition. What happened to them? They're here, Azura said simply. Living among us, experiencing the fullness of life that only Xylos can offer. She stepped closer, her scent overwhelming him. You could join them, James. Leave behind the constraints of your world and embrace true freedom. James's mind reeled. This was his chance to complete his mission, to uncover the truth. But the nectar clouded his thoughts, making the offer tempting beyond reason. I need time to think, he managed. Azura nodded, seemingly unsurprised. Of course. Lyra will show you to your quarters. Rest, explore our city. When you're ready, we'll talk more. As Lyra led him away, James caught sight of another woman watching from the shadows. Unlike the others, her expression was guarded, almost rebellious. Who's that? He asked Lyra. She glanced over her shoulder. Oh, that's Carrie. Don't mind her. She's different. Something in Lyra's tone piqued James's interest. As they walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that Carrie might be the key to unraveling the mysteries of Xylos. In his quarters, a spacious crystal chamber with a view of the jungle, James paced restlessly. The effects of the nectar were fading, leaving him clear-headed but craving more. He needed to focus, the missing expedition, the true nature of the nectar, the secrets Azura was hiding. He had to uncover it all. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Azura's mesmerizing gaze, felt Lyra's cool touch. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. James tensed, ready for anything. Come in, he called. The door opened, revealing the woman he'd seen earlier, Carrie. Up close, he could see that her blue skin was marked with intricate silver patterns, her eyes a startling shade of violet. You're the outsider, she said. It wasn't a question. James nodded. And you're the one who doesn't quite fit in here. A ghost of a smile flickered across Carrie's face. Perceptive. Maybe there's hope for you yet. She glanced over her shoulder before stepping into the room, closing the door behind her. Listen carefully, she said, her voice low and urgent. Everything is not as it seems here. The nectar, the sisterhood, it's all part of something bigger. James's pulse quickened. This was what he'd been waiting for. Tell me more. Carrie's eyes locked with his. I can't. Not here. Meet me at the edge of the crystal forest when the third moon rises. Come alone, and don't drink any more nectar. Before James could respond, she was gone, slipping out of the room like a shadow. He stood there, his mind racing. This was his chance to uncover the truth, to complete his mission. But as the memory of the nectar's effects lingered in his veins, a treacherous part of him wondered if he even wanted to leave this paradise.